Hey, this is Carrie Canary Quilts, and we're on week 11 of the Dear Jane Quilt Along here in 2024. If you're new here, I am using EQ8 with the Dear Jane add-on, but there are books available by Brenda Papadakis. And I think the 25th anniversary book follows the EQ8 add-on very closely. And then there's one from about 25 years ago, but I do believe you can build the quilt through those books. And also, if you don't want to watch the EQ8 that I put at the beginning of these videos, I have time codes for the construction of the blocks down in the video, in the description below this video. So you can go right directly to the blocks. So today I am using these purplish batiks. They kind of have different colors to them that I could put together. So my blocks, I kind of coordinated with these colors. They're not going to be all purple in my color chart. So let's place my blocks and then let's talk about them. So I have E-4 Buffalo Tree Hopper. E-4 is going there. And then I have G-9 Mary's Journey right there. We have H-1 Peekaboo. I-11 Coyote Chase. I-11, and then TR-11, top row 11 goes up there. So I do not have any variations this week. What I want to show you over here, I left these two in here for the first one, which was E-4. And you can see that there is a little bit of difference. I think this is variation 1. The difference is right here in the corner. You can see that there's these little white strips there and they're not down here. So that's the biggest difference between these two. So I'm just going with the top one that I have here. I don't think it'll be too hard to put that together, but we will have Y seams all the way around this. But hopefully they'll be big enough that it's not going to be too much of an issue. And then I have over here, it's I-11, this top one. So what I'm going to be doing, that is a combination of, it's probably going to be foundation paper piece or piecing with applique. The other option is down here, and that is going to be, that's variation 2. That is all applique if you want to do it that way. So I wanted to let you know that the variations here are real good. You could choose either one. You'll get the same look. And which ones I'm going with. I don't think this will be too hard at all to put together, so I went with just the center block here. All right, let's go take a look at these in our block work table. All right, here we are in the block work table with our E-4 block. What I want to show you here is the foundation paper pieces are, the 4 around the edges are virtually the same. So, I mean, these two have an additional A3, C3 piece on, but they're going to be virtually the same. The biggest thing is we're going to have some Y seams to put together on each of these corners. So I tried to find a way to make it so that there wouldn't be Y seams, and I didn't like how it looked with the seams, so I'm going to go with the Y seams. I like to avoid them, but I think in this case we'd have seams going all over the place in the middle, and I just don't know how well that would look. So that's what that's going to be like. I don't anticipate it being a problem. The Y seams should be large enough that we can get through them. All right. This block is pretty straightforward. I think I've made a block like this in the past, so it's just going to be a small version of it. I'm going to do foundation paper piecing, and you can see that the outer edges have their own section, and then the inner part is just 3 sections, so this will be easy to do. All right, we have H1, and if you thought the last one was going to be easy, this one's going to be even easier. You can see it's just 4 sections. They're pretty easy to put together. So you know, this one, it'll just take a little bit of time to build the sections. That's it. Won't be hard. All right, here's our I-11. I am doing the version where we're, you can see that it's applique for the diamonds and then it's pieced for the background. I am doing that version. There is an all applique version of this also. So the foundation paper piece, if you want to do it, is pretty easy. It's just got the 4 corners. I think that's what I'm going to do because I like the paper piece personally. But you could go over here to templates and you can get a templates for the corners in the middle right here. But if you're doing the one I'm doing and not doing templates, you're doing paper piecing, then you can delete these 2 pieces and just have your applique template left. So this one should be easy to put together also. All right, TR-11 looks difficult. I think it's just going to be time consuming. If we go and look at the foundation paper piecing, there is a lot of sections here, but you know, it's not, the sections aren't that hard to put together, and there's no Y seams here, if you can believe that. So the center part right here will go together, and then we'll come off to the right and put this section to the center, and then the purple section to those 2, and then we can add these corners individually and then add it to the bottom. So it's just going to take time to put the sections together. So I think this should be a relatively easy week. I'm looking forward to it, and the blocks are going to be really pretty. So let's go from here and let's start putting our blocks together.
All right, let's get started on week 11. This is E-4 Buffalo Tree Hopper. I gotta look it up. She says something about a bug. It's a real bug, you know? I don't know. I'll have to see if that's an actual bug or what. It'll be interesting to find out. Anyway, this is going to be, I think, fairly easy. We're going to have some Y seams, but I don't think they're going to be a problem. I'm just going to do one of these side pieces because these 2 pieces are exactly like this one. There's just an extra piece added on for the other side. So what I've got is I've got a big purple for the middle, and I've got little purple rectangles for right here. The little white rectangles are right here. Medium rectangles are for these 2 corners. And then the large pieces are right here in the sides. So let me get set up to do one of these, and we'll get working on this. Okay, we're going to get started on this section, and I have drawn it out basically on the back. I've cut it to the shape and then drawn my seam lines. We're starting here with a white piece, then our second piece is purple, third is white, fourth is white, and this is what we need for our pieces. If you're new here, I do have my cut pieces on my website. The link's in the description down below. You can go there and you can use my cut sizes if you want to. And I do adjust them if they don't work. So, and I usually only adjust them bigger. But anyway, first thing we need to do is put a white down. Make sure we have coverage between number 1 and number 2 all around it. And we're 1/4 of an inch above that line between 1 and 2. Now I'm going to take a purple because that's what we need here. And I think I'm going to do it this way because it is actually taller. And we need to sew between 1 and 2, and you'll want to do a lock stitch at at the beginning and the end. Okay, first 2 pieces are on. I have trimmed 1/4 of an inch for my third piece, and that's where we're going to use this rectangle. And I'm just going to make sure. So basically my cut on the paper is outside of my seam allowance, so right there, so we can make sure that we're going to cover even all the paper, so we'll be good here. So we can sew on the line now between A1, A2, and A3, so right along there. Okay, there's the first 3 pieces put on. Can't see any paper over here, so we have plenty of coverage. I have gone ahead and trimmed my 1/4 inch seam allowance here. So this one, because it's on an angle, can be tricky. I am going to, right here's the edge of my fabric. I'm going to make sure I have more fabric down here because we need to make sure we have, it goes out to here. My seam allowance goes out to there. So we need to have more fabric on this end. So if we just kind of fold it over and test it, it looks like it's going to work. So let's see. Let me put it down and see. All right, there's the first section done. I am going to go ahead and finish all my other sections. I am also going to sew right in here, right along there, the paper to my fabric, and then I will trim everything out and my paper will still be on my fabric. So that will be done also. And then we'll put this block together. All right, here's our 4 pieces, or 5 pieces, I guess. The 4 pieces I made on the outside. Here's the 2 short ones, 2 long ones. So I'm going to add these short ones on first on each side. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. So let's start with this one. I'm going to flip it over. And you can see this notch right here. I'm going to line up my edge of my piece right with that notch. Like that. And then this corners land together. You can also put pins in and do it that way. So since we are going to have Y seams, we only want to stitch from right here in this corner to right here in this corner. And that's it. Put a lock stitch there and a lock stitch there. And I think I will iron towards the center piece right now and see how that goes. So I'm going to get both of these pieces on and then we'll come back and we'll start doing our Y seams in here. All right, my 2 pieces are on. I have ironed them towards the center purple and you can see that I have that opening there where I stopped sewing. So it should be about 1/4 inch. I have it on all 4 of my corners. So what we are now going to need to do is put this piece on, sew along here, needle down, turn all our fabric, make it straight, sew along here, and then needle down, turn it again, and sew up. All right, so to put this piece on, we need to start on this edge. I have put a pin through this point, and I've brought it through this point. Let the pin fall straight, line up my edges here, and you can see that the point right here lands at the edge of my fabric also. So you can probably line it up like that. I'm going to take this out. I am going to just clip it on. So we now need to sew here, lock stitch, sew along this line right here till you get to this point right there where my needle was. My pin, needle down, and then we'll turn our fabric so it gets, so this edge lines up with this edge, and then we'll sew until we get to this point, needle down, and we'll do the same thing. We'll turn all our fabrics. I'm thinking, actually, now that I'm looking at it, I'm thinking that when we start sewing along this line across this edge, you'll want to pull your iron towards the center. You'll want to turn this back towards the edge so that you don't sew into this seam allowance right there. And we'll end up stopping before that. So then it'll still be open and we can turn it. All right, let's just go over to my machine and see how I do. All right, I'm over at my machine. I'm ready to start doing this Y seam. So I'm going to start at the top. Remember, I am going to stop at that point right there, and then with needle down, and then we'll maneuver our pieces so that we can turn them. stitch. All right. So let's start turning our pieces and line our edges up here. All right. I'm going to put this down. All right, I'm kind of changing up what I'm doing. I lock stitched it at that point. So now I'm going to, I have it ironed towards the center. I'm going to pull it over here to the other side. And then I'm going to turn my fabric. My piece is ripping and I don't like it. So now when I put it back, I've got it lined up with the edges. Get my piece lined up again. And because I moved that seam, it'll now be out of the way and I won't be sewing through the seam when I put my needle down. So I'm going to put my needle down now, back in that corner that I just stopped at. And I'm going to sew to this point right here. But before I do that, remember we need to take this seam allowance and fold it back out of the way. And you'll be able to feel that seam allowance. And if your point is over that seam, then you want to stop before. But my point is before that seam. You can even mark it if you want, because you can feel it and you can see it. All right. So let's fold that seam back to where it was. We need to, sorry, I had to take it where I could see it. I turned it so that my edge is lined up here, and you can see that this is kind of folded in half, but if we put our needle down right there, we shouldn't run into this seam allowance. Lock stitch it and sew it on. All right, not too bad. Could be better, but hey, I'm not that skilled at Y seams. But the nice thing is by moving your seams out of the way and make these seam allowances out of the way, you're not sewing into them. So you can see that it's still laying flat. And now it wants to fold. We don't want it to fold in there anymore. We want it to fold up this way, so that when it lays down, it's laying flat. All right, so I kind of changed the way I did things. I sewed, just to recap, I sewed along here, stopped, did a lock stitch, took it out, folded everything over, moved my seam back this way. This seam allowance, instead of being here, I moved it this way, lined up my edge, put it back in my machine, started right here at this point with a lock stitch, sewed to this point right before this seam allowance, lock stitch, took it out, maneuvered everything here so that I had a point like this, lined up my edges, started sewing here, and sewed on out. So a little different than what I thought I was going to do. I honestly think this seam allowance could be ironed open. And I'm not sure about this one. Let's see. Yeah, let's come back and iron these seam allowances open. See that? And then it'll all lay down flat right there. All right. Let me know how it goes for you. I'm going to get the other one on, and we'll see if this turns out square. There we go. Look at that. It's nice and square. Y seams look pretty good. So I did iron these open, which helped lay these corners or points flat. So it ends up being a pretty flat block too. So there you go. I hope I helped with that. And like I said, the Y seams didn't go exactly how I thought they were going to go, but that's what you got to do. You got to sew and make sure that you're ready to pivot if you need to. All right, we are on G-9, Mary's Journey, and this is what we're going for here. I think there's just a lot of pieces here. I don't think it's going to be too awfully hard. I think what I'll do is I'll put together one of these, and then I'll put together one of these. This is pretty much just straight pieces. You're going to start in the middle and work out. And then this is the same as that. So I will do these two pieces here. What I have here is these purple triangles go wherever you see a purple triangle in here. These little tiny purple triangles go in these tiny ones. These two, oh, there's just one. I cut two, but there's just one. These purple square is in the center. The white rectangles are where you see the rectangles here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then these white triangles are where you see the triangles in like the flying geese in the corners. So I've got to see if what I cut fits, if here in the middle. If it doesn't, I will certainly make it larger before you go and get my cut pieces. So let's get started. All right, I actually went ahead and put one together just to make sure I had big enough pieces. My pieces are just big enough for this, so when I put them up on my website, I'm going to make this one bigger than what I'm using, just so you know. So we have, let me get it drawn out. All right, here it is drawn out. We're going to start right here in the corner of our flying geese with a purple, and then our second one is going to be a white triangle, and then 3 is a purple. And then we're going to come over here and do 4 white, 5 purple, 6 white, 7 purple. So let's take a purple triangle. And what I'm going to do is I am going to mark 1/4 inch. Since my piece is so close to working, or fitting. So we want our purple to be oriented like this. I want to lay it in here. We've got coverage off the paper and plenty of coverage over here between in this seam, and we're 1/4 inch over the seam we want to sew on. This white piece needs to be oriented like that, so I'm going to flip it. I'm going to lay it here. And I'm going to do about 1/4 inch. This is our next seam, so about 1/4 inch past that, and we shouldn't have to trim. So I'm going to clip this. And we will sew right here between B1 and B2. Here's my first 2 pieces. I don't need to trim because I have about 1/4 inch already there. I guess I could trim that purple piece off. And now we want to add another triangle. Purple triangle needs to be oriented like this. So let's just flip it over. And I've got my corner kind of lined up here. So we will now sew between B2 and B3. Okay, there's my first 3 pieces. We've got our center flying goose. I have gone ahead and trimmed my 1/4 inch. So now we can grab a white triangle. That's what our, you know what, it doesn't matter. 4 is actually over here. I chose the right side because I'm right-handed. It doesn't matter which way you go. I know I'm at 6, 4 is over here. It just doesn't matter. So I'm starting on this side. So our white triangle needs to be oriented like that. So let's just flip it over. Our seam allowance is, oops, right here. So I've got plenty of coverage on both sides. We are going to sew right along this line right there between B3 and, well, let's just change that to B4. All right, there's my fourth piece. This is going to be now 5. It's going to be purple. Grab a purple triangle, and we want it to be oriented like this. So we'll just flip it over. Line up our corners here. Right there's the corner I want. And sew in between 4 and 5. I'm going to do the exact same thing on this side. So this side is exactly like this side. Okay, there we go. It's all done. Not too hard to put together. So let's move on to this one where we need to draw it out. So we're going to start here with the first one is going to be purple, then a white, and then up here's our little tiny triangle, which is the third one, and then fourth is also purple. So we need to start with a purple triangle. It needs to be oriented like this. So let's lay it here. And here's my seam allowance. So we have plenty of coverage, about a 1/4 inch over. Next, we want to grab a white rectangle, lay it down so that we have coverage over here and over here. And we'll sew on the line between 1 and 2. Okay, there's my first 2 pieces. I have trimmed my 1/4 inch seam allowance here on the third piece. We're going to take one of these tiny little triangles and just line it up so that our points line up right here. And then we can sew right across the line between E2 and E3. All right, there's our third piece, our tiny little triangle. I have trimmed between the fourth piece and the second piece, 1/4 inch. And now we just need another purple triangle, which will be oriented like that. So let's just line it up. I'm just going to line it up with my white piece right here. And we'll sew on the line between E2 and E4. All right, there's the piece I just put together. I put the rest of the pieces together. They went together pretty easily. Now I need to go and trim all these up and we can put our block together. All right, there's our pieces done. This is how they're laid out, and they do have the flying geese pointing out towards the outside of the block, as you can see over here. All we need to do now is put this square together, and I'm just going to line up my seams here in the middle and do that. Once that square is together, we'll just add these 2 pieces, and then we'll add these, and we'll be done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up those seams, and that one nests. And then it looks like my edges line up also. So I'm going to iron these seams open. You could line up the edges here if you want to, but I want my seams in the middle to line up. So that's where I'm putting all my eggs in the basket. All right. Let's get this center made. All right, there's my center square. Now I'm going to take my flying geese and put them so that the point of the flying geese is pointing on the outside of the block. And I'm just going to line these up edge to edge, sew them on, and I will also, let's see, let's iron towards the center block since these are ironed away from the flying geese. That way we'll have a nested seam right there. Okay, there's my center. I've gone ahead and ironed towards the middle square here so that my seams right here will nest together. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to put these together like you would, like a 9 patch. Nest those seams up, iron it, and I'll iron these seams open. Sounds good. All right, there's Mary's journey. That turned out really nice. Not too hard to put together. I'm glad that with all the seams that it is paper pieced, but that probably could be put together without paper piecing. All right, there you go. Pretty, pretty, pretty. Okay, let's move on to H-1 Peekaboo. this is what it's going to look like. These are the paper pieces for it, and this isn't going to be too hard at all. What I'll do is I'll do this corner piece that may be a little more challenging. This is pretty straightforward. If you watch the few blocks in front of me, you know, you just add 2 to 1, and it's pretty easy and straightforward. So I'm going to do a corner block, and then we can put the whole block together, which will be easy too. I anticipate this being a hard block. So my pieces are, I've got strips for these 2 long strips. These squares are for inside these pieces, the purple. The big rectangles are for these outer pieces. The small rectangle is right in here, these 2 rectangles in there. And then the white squares are in the middle, and then all the white triangles around the edge. So let's get set up. All right, here's the section I'm going to be demonstrating. We have our number 1 pieces right here, which is going to be this rectangle. 2 and 3 on each side are the white triangles, and we're going to go to 4, which is the long rectangle, and then 2 more white triangles on the ends for 5 and 6. I have drawn it out there. So let's take our 1, which is going to be this rectangle. 2's over here. I just want to make sure, number 1, I have coverage out here beyond the paper. All right, I'm back. I had to go rescue a gecko from my cat's jaws. I wasn't expecting to see that, and it was a big one. So we use a butterfly net. I put my cat in it, and then he lets go of the gecko, and then I take it outside. So my heart's pounding a little bit. Anyway, all right, we're back. First piece is right here. Second piece is right there. We want to make sure we have plenty of coverage on the outside and over this line, and then at least a 1/4 of an inch over that line. So that's what I've got. And now we need to take one of our triangles, and it's going to be oriented this way. So we'll flip it over, and we want to make sure, I'm going to line it up here. We want to make sure we have plenty of coverage here, and it's big enough to give us coverage out to here. So I am going to sew on the line between 1 and 2 right there. All right. There's my first 2 pieces. My third piece is over here. I've gone ahead and trimmed it a 1/4 of an inch. So we're going to do the same thing. Grab one of our white triangles. It needs to be oriented like that. So we'll just flip it over, line up the right triangles, and make sure we have enough coverage here along this seam. And it's big enough that we have coverage out here. So sew on the line between 1 and 3. Here's my third piece. I have trimmed along, I folded this over between 1 and 4, trimmed my 1/4 of an inch. So we'll go ahead and add my long purple. And that's got plenty of coverage on each side. So I'm going to sew along this line right here, lock stitching at the seam intersections. All right, I have my 4th piece on. You can see I have plenty of coverage because pretty much my pieces are going right off the paper. And I have cut past that seam allowance line. So we're doing pretty good on these pieces. Okay, for 5, I've gone ahead, folded my piece, cut my 1/4 inch seam allowance. Our, turn around here. Let's see, yeah. Our triangle is going to be oriented this way. So we'll flip it over and make sure that it's just basically off the paper right there. So between these 2, 4 and 5, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing for A6 over here. All right, here's the piece I just finished. I went ahead and finished these out and trimmed them up. Remember, this is what we're going for. But I just wanted to remind you that the way I trim is I put my 1/4 inch line from my ruler on my seam line, which is the solid line, and then I use that to trim. So that way I know that my 1/4 inch is that far away from where I'm going to be sewing. And then the way I do it, I don't know if this is right or not, but if I have a ruler that's smaller, I just either get a bigger ruler or keep my blade there, move my ruler, and keep going. And trim those notches. if they're on your pattern. And we are ready to put this block together. All right, that's how it's going together. First thing we need to do is put these two in the center together. And the way that we put them together, these seams in the middle will nest each other. So I'm just going to line those up. I'm going to pin them, and I'm going to sew them and iron them open. All right, I sewed these two pieces together, iron that seam open. Now we just need to put these together, and you'll see that the notches line up perfectly with the edge of these pieces. So pin that on, we'll sew that, lock stitch at your corners here, and then I'm going to put the other side on exactly the same way and iron it open. All right, there's H-1 Peekaboo. Look how pretty that block is, and not very hard to put together either. So that was a fun one. Going to be some pretty blocks this week. All right, we're ready to start I-11 Coyote Chase. This is what it's going to look like. And we do have an applique. This is what it's going to look like when we start putting it together. But we do have an applique that's going to be in the middle of each corner. So I have purple for my big blocks. I have triangles for the little triangles in the corner. And this will be real easy to put together. I've cut a piece of white for my applique. I've already traced it, and I traced on the solid line. So I need to put this down on my white piece of paper, my fabric. I will get that fused on, and then I will be able to cut it out and get ready for when we're ready to put it on as an applique. So I'm just going to do one of these real quick, and then we'll put the block together. So I think this will go pretty fast. All right, to get started on I-11, I've cut out one of my pieces here. I'm going to take a purple. I'm not going to draw this out because we need to cut. I'm going to take a purple. I'm just going to put it on so it's over all my lines. I can see through my paper. And I'm going to clip it. Let's see, clip it over here. And what we need to do is we need to trim right there. So let's get our paper out. Pull it back along the line between D1 and D2 and trim 1/4 inch seam line. Then we can add one of our triangles. And again, I'm lining my point up with the point. You can't see it probably, but right here. Line my point up with that. Sew in the line in between the two, and then repeat for the rest of these. There we go. There's the 4 pieces, exactly the same. Now we can put them together in a 4 patch, which I'm going to iron this row to the right and this row to the left so that I have a nested seam in the middle. And then we'll come back and put our applique on. All right, there's my block put together. I ironed my long seam open. What I'm doing when I'm laying these down is, and you can do it whatever way you want to, I just decided I was gonna go 1 1/4 from the center. Put my ruler on 1 1/4 at the center, kind of line it up with the corner, and then put my corner of my diamond there, line up the top corner with the top up here, this corner, and then lay it down. That's how I decided to do it. I think it looks pretty good. You may want to do it a different way, but there you go. I'm going to get this ironed down. All right, that's our last center block for this week, Coyote Chase. That was super easy to put together. Really pretty. And I literally got lucky that my patterns going the same way. I did not plan that, but somehow my brain, without me knowing, planned it. Good job, Carrie's brain. All right, let's go on to our top row block. All right, we're working on TR-11, which is top row, 11th block. These are our border blocks, and let's see. Yep, this is what we're going for. We've done something very similar to this a couple weeks ago, especially these inside blocks right here and these types of blocks. I think what I'll do is show you this one and this one. Just demonstrate those, and then you'll be set up to do the rest of these. This one is similar to that one. And if you're following along with me, then you've done blocks like this. And this one. So I have a ton of pieces. Again, I have my cut pieces on my website that you can go to and use if you want to. So you don't have to figure it out for yourself. Anyway, there's a lot of pieces to go through here. So if you go to my website, you can figure out which pieces go where. Because I'm going to need my notes to figure it out. All right, let me get these two cut out and we'll get started on those. All right, let's start with the A section that I'm going to demonstrate. So I have my purple piece that I need. The A2 and A4 piece are these two, and then I've got a long piece for A3. So I drew it out. Our first piece is purple. Our second is white, third is white, fourth is white. So I need I need a purple and I need a white. So I'm just going to put those together right now. And I'm going to lay them here so that I have coverage over everything. And I made these plenty big. So I am going to sew on this tiny little line right there and lock stitch at the beginning and the end. And then I'm going to trim it 1/4 inch because I have plenty to work with here. Okay, I've got my first piece put on. If you want to make sure it's 1/4 inch, you can fold this back, pull your ruler over, and then trim it up from there. So, I guess I had it pretty close. All right, I've ironed it. Let's go to 2 and we'll fold that back and get it trimmed up. And then I'm going to take my other rectangle that goes here, line it up along my trimmed piece, and we want to make sure we're outside of the seam allowance, which is right there. We've got plenty of room. So now I'm going to just sew between A1, A2, and A4. I guess it doesn't matter. I do that a lot. This can be A3 and this can be A4 because that's how I want to do it. But you don't have to do it that way. All right, there's my first 3 pieces. I went ahead and trimmed my 1/4 inch. So this is a pretty steep angle, and the steeper angle you get, the harder it is to try to get a rectangle to fit. I mean, you can, and it does, but just to make sure, see, I didn't even fold it correctly. Just to make sure, I'm going to lay this down so it covers everything I need it to cover. It's covering all my paper. I can see through the seam here at where my seam allowance ends, and it ends right there. So if we pick it up and pull it back, you can see I marked where my seam allowance ends. All right. That's my seam allowance. I can see that's the seam allowance from the pieces I have on there. I now want to find 1/4 inch away from that, and that's where I'm going to cut this piece. So there's my cut line. I'm just going to roughly cut it there. And then it's going to be sitting on the piece like this. So now I want to flip it over. And we're going to have to play with it a little. I think we probably want it centered. It's kind of folded over. But with that cut that we just made, it now falls just the way we want it to. So sometimes you have to get a little creative to make sure your pieces fall the way you want, but that's how I'm doing this one. And so now I'm just going to sew in between 1 and 2, and well, it would be my A4. All right, there's my first piece put together creatively. This one shouldn't be as creative, but we'll see. We've got 2 triangles we have to do, B1, B2, and then we'll do the long purple one, which is B3, and then B4 is the white. The outside of the paper roughly matches the piece. So I have my first one is purple, my second one is white, third one is purple, fourth one is white. So I'm going to put my purple and my white together. And purple is the first one, so it's going to go on the bottom. I want to put it about 1/4 inch over between my 1 and 2. and make sure that I have coverage everywhere else around it. So I'm going to sew right here between 1 and 2. Lock stitch at intersection. Okay, there's my first 2 pieces put on. I've gone ahead and folded on my second between 2 and 3, cut my seam allowance. So I want to do the same thing here. This is, again, a pretty steep angle. So let's just lay this out so that it has coverage on all the paper. So I know I'm good. And then I can feel that seam line. I can feel it with my pen and my finger. So that's that seam allowance line, I should say, not seam line. I want to go 1/4 of an inch beyond it. So I'm just kind of eyeballing, marking, and where I'm marking is where I'm cutting. So there we go. Again, this is how we want it to look. So now we have to flip it over like this. And you can just kind of play with it to see exactly where to lay it. I need to move it up. All right. So I have my, here's my seam allowance line right there. I have my corner almost to my seam allowance line. So that's where I'm going to place my piece. And now I'm going to sew right here between B2 and B3. All right, there we go. Third piece is on. It fits great. I've got coverage everywhere. I went ahead and folded between B3 and B4, cut my seam allowance. So now I can take this piece, which I tried to use on the first one. I did cut it right, but I didn't hit the record button. That's why it's missing a triangle, but it will work because it's long enough. I'm going to lay this here. I'm off the paper here. I'm off the paper here, and I've got plenty here to work with. So I'm going to sew between B3, B1, B3, and B4. All right, there's that piece. You can see we had plenty to work with there. So those are the harder pieces in this. I hope that I helped you with these steeper angles on how to figure them out, because once you put a rectangle down and try to start folding it, it's going to get pretty wonky. So I'm going to finish up all the other pieces and then get them trimmed up, and we'll start putting this together. All right, here's all my pieces finished. So what I did this time, I did put, this is just a single piece, and you know, I've been sewing them within the seam allowance, but I did the number 1 piece, like down here, the number 1 piece, the big piece, I just sewed it down so that when I was cutting it, it wouldn't move. And then with these too, put a little stitch in there in the seam allowance to hold it together instead of pinning it or clipping it. So that seems to work out well. Anyway, this is how it gets laid out. We've got the big piece down here. We've got these 2 triangular pieces with the longer edge on the inside. Then we have to build this piece on the inside. It's going to be like a diamond that we're going to be eventually building. These 2 pieces are going to go together. And then we'll add this piece, and then we'll add that piece. And then this piece that I showed you, I demonstrated for you, is going to go up on the right. And then this is going to be the point of our triangle. So let's start in the middle. And these 2, whoops, I was going to say they nest, but they would, but you need to put them together like that. And these notches are going to match on this side and on this side. So that's what we want to do. Sew these together. I think at this point I'm going to be ironing open until I say I'm not. How about that? All right, I'm going to start sewing. All right, there's my first 2 pieces ironed open. Now I need to add these pieces on each side. So flip them over. And let's line up our edge. And I think what I'm going to do is line up the point of this notch with this edge. And that point is almost on this edge. So I think that's how it's going to be. Get it sewn on, iron it open, and I'm going to do the same thing with this one, and I'll let you know if this is correct with these notches. All right, so the notches did line up exactly like I thought they would. This is what our centerpiece is going to look like. So we need to add this piece before we can add this piece. So let's do that and see how this is going to line up. And it looks like the point of this notch is going to be right there on that edge. So I will be ironing this one open also. All right, there's this piece put on. Those notches were the way we did it. And at this point, we can either add this one or we can start adding these. Because this one doesn't play into that one. So either way, let's go down here. Let's work from the bottom. Take this side and, ooh, look at that. The notches. Look at that. This notch lines up with this edge, and so does this notch. So that's going to make it much easier. I'm still ironing open. All right, got this side on. Looks good. And I'll add this side. Should be the same. And of course it's not. It's the points are going to line up on each edge. And I'm going to iron this one open. Okay, this one's on. Looks great down here. At first I was like, ooh, a little wonky, but we got to add this piece. So this piece is going to go on. I'm going to match it up here because you can see with the notch right there that it lines up perfectly with this edge. So I'm going to get this sewn on and iron it open. All right, that helps that out. So let's put the bottom on. See how that looks. It looks like this is going to have some tails. You could also line up your points here. And they are lined up. So you could line up your points right there. You could have equal tails on each side. So I will be ironing this open also. All right, I got the bottom part sewn on, but that was tough to get through that point right there. So I'm not going to iron it open. I'm going to iron towards the bottom. All right, there's TR-11 Phoenix. That's what we're going for. That's what it looks like. So that was intense putting together more than I think paper piecing. Laying it out and then figuring out how to put this together. Anyway, yeah, it's pretty. I like it. It's going to be pretty in my quilt.
All right, we made it through some challenging blocks this week, especially with the Y seams in E-4 Buffalo Tree Hopper. Oh goodness, I didn't look to see if that was a bug. Still have to look that up. So that was a little challenging. But it turned out square, it turned out 5 inches, so hey, makes me happy. This was just, these two were probably a little more, well, this one was labor intensive, this one wasn't. Look how pretty that block is though. That is really pretty in those colors that I chose. And then super easy block here, this applique. So if you're new here, I'm going to applique my pieces later, just in case I get some other kind of inspiration other than machine applique. So I'll let you know when I decide what I'm going to do with my appliques. And then this one was another labor-intensive block. But oh, look at it. It's so pretty. These blocks are turning out so pretty. We're starting to populate the quilt, the photo quilt I've got here. Again, if you're new, I'll put a video down below on how to do this if you're not sure how to do this. But this is really fun to see how your quilt's coming together by taking pictures of the blocks. So let's put them in. Let me know how yours is going if you're doing this. Or you can take you can export a picture and let me see it. Either send it to my email that's down below or post it out on social media. I'd love to see how your quilt is coming along if you're doing this photo quilt in EQ8. So let's add my blocks. E4. Let's put in E4 right there. and G-9, H-1, I-11, H-I-11, right there, and TR-11. We need to populate up here. When are we going to start doing some of these? I also had someone ask me how I'm doing these blocks, and I literally went out onto ChatGPT and asked it to write me a computer program to randomize the letters and numbers of the center blocks. So I got that random listing, and that's what I'm using instead of just going for the top, the bottom. I kind of wanted to fill this in all over instead of one row at a time, and that's just me. That's just the way I wanted to do it. So that's how I'm doing it. But anyway, hit the subscribe button, notification bell. You get notified of all my Dear Jane quilt along content and all the other fun stuff we got going on here. I appreciate you, and I appreciate the comments you leave for me, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.